For some long while, it's been suggested that we have to learn to become divine scientists, divine physicists, divine alchemists, and divine psychologists. But over these last several days, it's been learned that there is another ability that we have to add to our pantheon, and that is that we have to become divine lawyers. It means that we have to learn to ask the probing questions that take us to the core, the essence, the truth of the mysteries that come before us. Over these many years of telling stories and hearing them, it's no doubt that you've recognized that there are many, many stories from different persuasions that contain the same theme, the same characters, the same symbols, the same archetypes. But if we begin to learn to be that divine lawyer and ask the questions, we can find the essence, the core, the truth of these stories and all others. There is that story about two brothers. One was very, very rich, and the other was very, very poor. So on the occasions when there was to be a festival, the poor brother would go to the rich brother and ask for the wheat, the basic essential for providing those things that constituted that reception, that celebration. But there was an occasion when the poor brother went to the rich brother, but the rich brother refused to give that which was needed. But the poor man's need was very great to provide for his family this necessary day of festivity. So he came again and again and again to ask his rich brother, but his rich brother refused, until the point of time where the rich brother became so angry that he said to his poor brother, "Go to Azida." Now, that means go to the devil. But the poor man was not a learned being. So his interpretation of what it was that his brother had said, that he should go and find Azida, a person. And so this is what he decided to do. He went back to his home and he took some bread and wine and cheese and set out to find Azida. Now on his travels, tired and hungry and thirsty, he saw a light in a window of a little house, and he went there to seek hospitality. And the door was opened to him by 3 maidens who welcomed him in, because strangers didn't come by that way often, and they did indeed offer him hospitality. But he noticed that the 3 maidens were very sad, and he asked them what it is that's troubling you. Now, as it happens, these 3 maidens were seamstresses. One made garments out of gold, another made garments out of wool, and a third made garments out of silk. And all of them said, "We have been sewing and making for all of these years, and all we want is to be married and settle down. But no men have come by this way to ask for our hands in marriage." So the poor man said, "Well, I'm going to Azadeh. Would you like me to ask him, her, it?" And the three maidens said, "Yes, please, please ask the question for us." So the next day the poor man went on his way, seeking Azadeh. And then there was another day when, tired and fatigued, he sat down under a tree. But when he looked up, he noticed the tree had fruit hanging from its branches. So reaching up, he picked it. Only when he bit into it, he found that the fruit was so bitter. And he lamented this loudly. "I wonder why this tree's fruit is so bitter and not sweet." And it's like the tree spoke to him and said, "Yes, how sad I am that my fruit, although I bear fruit, is so inedible, so bitter to the taste." "Oh," said the poor man, "I'm going to Azadeh. Would you like me to ask?" The tree said, "Yes, please ask." So the poor man set out on his way again until he came to a wide river. How was he to cross when he saw that there was a ferry boat there? And so he asked for passage across the river. As they were rowing, poor man noticed that the ferryman was sad and morose. "What is it that troubles you?" The ferryman said, "I take this ferry back and forth, but I'm not able to alight from this ferry. What can I do?" The poor man said, "Well, I'm going to Azadeh. Would you like me to ask?" And of course the ferryman said, "Please, please ask for me." Now the poor man set out again on his quest to find Azadeh. And then he found himself in a dense, dense forest. When he entered the forest, of course, the day passed, and he could see that the sun was going down. And then he came to a little clearing where there was a little hut. So again he thought he would ask for hospitality. When he knocked on the door, an old, old woman answered, an old crone, an old knowing crone. She welcomed him in, and after giving him hot soup, she asked him what was his quest. And he said, "I'm looking for Azadeh. I have need to provide for my family, and I have questions to ask." Now the old woman was knowing and wise, and she could recognize what it was about this poor man. So her response was, I am often called Azadeh. Perhaps if you ask me the questions, I will be able to answer. So the poor man asked the question about the 3 maidens. The old woman said, "Tell the maidens to fashion their wedding gowns of gold and wool and silver, and their husbands will come." And he asked on behalf of the tree. There is that tree that bears bitter fruit. "Oh," said the old woman, "under the tree there is a great cask, a chest that is impeding the flow of nutrients to its trunk and its branches. Remove the trunk, and the essence needed will flow." And then the ferryman's question. The old woman said, "When the ferryman can find someone to replace him, he will be free to alight from the ferry." Now the old woman said, "Each of these answers give you what it is that you yourself seek. Take them and do with them what you will." So, scratching his head somewhat, the poor man took his leave from the old woman and went back, and on his way told the ferryman, "The answer to your question is that when another comes to take your place, you will be free to alight." The ferryman was grateful for this answer. Then the poor man went to the tree and gave the answer to the tree and said, "I will dig for you." And when he dug under the tree and the chest was opened, he found it was filled with gold. He was a rich man. Then, taking this, he went and made his way to the little house with the 3 maidens and gave the advice that had been given. He was welcomed for the night, and in that night the 3 maidens fashioned their wedding gowns out of gold and wool and silk. And the very next day, as the poor man was leaving, 3 handsome men came riding up, and of course were the bridegrooms, the husbands-to-be of the maidens. Then the poor man returned to his home, now a rich man, sharing with his family and friends and the community the wealth that he had dug up from under the tree. Amongst those who were invited to the reception that he gave was his rich brother, very, very surprised to see his previously poor brother now rich and avid to know how he came by his wealth. The poor man told his story, and immediately his rich brother set out to retrace his poor brother's steps. What he found were 3 happily married maidens, a tree that bore luscious and sweet fruit. But when he came to the ferry boat and asked to be ferried across the river, when he entered the ferry boat, the ferryman alighted, leaving the rich man to go back and forth across the river. Looking at these abilities, learning to become a divine scientist, physicist, alchemist, psychologist, and lawyer, what question would be asked to get to the core, the essence, the truth contained in this story and all the similar stories and all other stories, everyone's story that is told, that is experienced? What question would we ask to glean the essence, the core, the truth of this story?
The real richness is to help others, and in helping others, you help yourself.
Yes.